Welcome to Lessons from Last Time. I hope this is just one of the many of these episodes that you've listened to. I know it's been fun to do these episodes. I've got today a guy named Damian Fischer, and Damian and I have been friends for a really long time. And what you're going to learn today from Damian, you'll get a lot of his story in the beginning, and then he's going to dive in some pretty, tough times and pull some lessons out of, making decisions to make change in his life, maybe at the wrong time. And then what happened with that. So I'm really excited. I want you to listen to this whole thing because there is some real value in here for people who are, strategists and run into troubles, and then, trying to deal through those struggles is what he's going to get into. And it's just really valuable. So check it out. Also, if you haven't already, please consider joining Coop Plus. Coop Plus is our content. Basically, it's knowledgecoop.com, join Coop Plus, and it's where we deliver all the content to the mortgage industry. Some of it is free and available for you. You might be watching this inside of Coop Plus, and then we've got a boatload of content that we've created to try and help this industry grow every single day in knowledge. And so if you jump in there and become a premium member of Coop Plus, you get access to everything we basically ever do, including continuing education and all that stuff. So go check it out, but let's listen to Damian Fischer talk about a very interesting and career full of struggles and victories. Damian Fischer, longtime friend. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well, man. It is so incredible to be able to see you and watch you explode the way you have. I'm a fan sitting on the sideline watching a meteor, and you were just blowing it up, my friend.
Well, dude, I should tell everybody that you are the guy that started my speaking career. So after I got my first gig ever, you had booked me and went out of your way to book me out there in Spokane to do a gig. And that gig ended up launching my speaking career into I flew all over the country speaking that in the next many years because of that one gig that you did. And I don't know if we want to talk about what happened in that seminar.
Well, it's a part of life.
That it's a longer story than this, but Damian booked me to do a gig, and I spoke and for all day. And it was a really important gig because it was going to trigger this launch of my career. And I had been drinking a ton of water, and I told everybody to focus and write down 3 things. And I ran out of the room and went to the bathroom with the mic on. So that was my first and only ever experience having that happen. But I remember walking out, and I think it was Lee that was standing outside. He's like, dude, your mic was on. And I said, did anybody hear? He goes, everybody heard. And so I was like, okay, there we go. And I was like, do I run or do I walk back in? So there's a lesson from my last time of I never did it again because I learned that so early in my career.
Yeah, it was a great spot of levity in the middle of an afternoon that was, everybody was loving it, but boy, that really set the stage for the rest of the afternoon. It was amazing you were able to keep everybody together and running because they were all so distracted after that because they busted out laughing so badly.
Yeah, that was pretty awesome. So enough about me. So you and I worked together back in 2000, when I moved up to the Northwest. You were up in Spokane. That's the first time I met you. But where were you before that? What was your, who was Damian prior to when we met working for the same mortgage company?
So I came out of college with a business degree out of Seattle U, and had been working to put myself to keep food on the table for the family, working at a carpet store. I'd actually gotten hired there. I thought I was being hired to be a warehouseman. And the gentleman that was in charge of the place was a family friend. I had roommate with his brother for a long time. And he goes, no, I'm hiring you for sales. I said, you got to be kidding. There's no way I'm going to be a salesman. Not going to happen. I don't like salesmen. And he goes, no, I think you'd be really good at it. You got to give it a try. So I said, fine. I said, what's the pay? And we moved on through it. And I spent a total of 5 years selling carpet. For carpet liquidators up in Tacoma, and became pretty good at it. It was great, but all of a sudden went from having an absolute phobia because a family member of mine had been a car salesman, and that really had kind of tilted me against salespeople, if you will. But turned around that I was pretty good at it, and I really found my niche in education sales rather than presentation sales. So in other words, if I'm doing my job, if I'm educating along the way, and I've heard others talk about different styles and methods, but I focus on delivering value. And when I'm done on the backside of the value, then I figure that I'll get the sale if I'm doing a good job taking care of them. So I moved from that, got my college degree, had a baby, all of a sudden became all grown up, cut my hair, and became a adult. And from that point forward, while doing all of that, came out of college, graduated, and got an offer in the .com period to run for a company called MLS Online, to be the Western region. It started as a Seattle, Washington salesman, and then became the Western region for them. And was kind of not making a lot of money at it. I was kind of doing it at the same time while I was still selling carpet, and ended up the day I landed my biggest account. I had landed one of the attorney's offices in Bellevue, one of the loan officers. The gal that became my mentor, by a woman by the name of Joanne Latham, I had convinced her to say yes, and we had gotten the boss to say yes, and I'd landed at that time a $10,000 a month contract. And on my way home with the signed piece of paper in my hot hands, I got home to an email that said the company had been sold and that I was no longer going to be needed for the job. And because of the technology that they had basically created an alternative with some kind of algorithm in it at that time that was like the MLS, but it was built specifically for FSBOs. And so I had been working around and got trained by that gentleman with a bunch of scripts and all of that. And so I turned around and took a couple of days to go, wow, what am I going to do here? Went back to them and said, hey, I would love to do this for you. I'm sure I can find a way to recreate it and not step on toes or get myself contractually in trouble. And they said, yeah, we'd be interested. We'd love to, but yeah, we're not going to be able to do that now without the backing and everything else. So the only way you're going to do this is if you become an LO and do it for yourself. And that's how I got into the industry, was that flip on the sale of the company. And Joanne Latham then took me under her wing. And for the next 5 years, she was the world's greatest opener and could sell ice to an Eskimo along with a 6-month delivery service of additional ice and all the freezers that you needed. Where I became the back end to her was I was great at figuring out how to get the loans she could promise that were getting done. My job was to figure out how to get them done, because often there were so many stories and hair and challenges and everything that was related with file. Not all of them could be done, but it was the effort. And this was all done on the hilltop. So we joined together and opened up Options Financial. It was actually Joanne's company, but I helped her and we worked through. And our first office was on 6th and Division on the hilltop in Tacoma. And with her education and helping the people, we kind of grew, and I went on from there and helped her. I think we ended up with 7 or 8 loan officers and staff that we were working through at the time. And things got a little tight that time, just at the tail end of it. And so we looked at consolidating. And I had another friend that I knew that had a brokerage. And I said, we'd really be better if we were all together, because he had a couple and she had all of these. And so we ended up combining the branches and became a larger office. And that actually helped us with scales of economy. She eventually didn't want to stay in it, and I stayed with him and all the crew that we had. And eventually there was a sales account executive by the name of Christine Borden, who was our account executive for Option One. And at that point, I had really become quite good friends with her and was quite impressed with her knowledge and skills. And so she helped me a little bit. And one day, my wife told me at the time that we were moving to Spokane and I could come if I wanted to, but she and the children were moving. And I said, okay, you know what, that's a good call. It's time to get out of Spokane, out of Seattle, and kind of make the move. After much debate, we decided that I was in agreement as long as I could either start my own brokerage or I ended up becoming an account executive.
Okay.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Sorry, dude. Okay. So we're going to bookmark that because I want to talk to you about how that conversation went. But I first want to stop you on the Joanna, right? Joanne. So you and Joanne, I'm always fascinated when people can figure out a yin and a yang, right? When one person brings one value, the other person brings the other value, and they don't cross over. And then you've got this perfection of I do me, you do you, and together that works. And coming from debate back in college, I'll never forget, you can be a great debater if you don't have a partner that makes up for your weaknesses and then you make up for theirs, your team's going nowhere, right? So you did this. How did you develop trust in that relationship? Where was it just that she was awesome at it and you didn't even have to think about it? Or did you have to develop a trust between the two of you?
No, she was so good at opening up the door. And I've got one heck of a work ethic. I've got a good old farm boy work ethic. So I remember working until 2 a.m. in the mornings up on the hilltop, just driving, going home at 2 and coming back at 8 a.m. in the morning, trying to figure out how to make the deals work because we needed money. And it really somehow fell on my shoulders that we needed to figure that out. And I knew that I was not as good as she was in that space at that time. I just didn't have the confidence in myself because, again, I'm probably 4 or 5 years into my sales, 6 years into my sales career. So really very, very greener. Don't know anything about assumptive selling or any of the other tools that are available to us as salespeople, and discovered that, she did this really well. Let's let her continue to do it. Let me fill the gap behind it because I've always been about solutions. Well, if I've got a great answer right there, let me figure out what the rest of it is. So it developed naturally. I was blessed. There's no other way to say. I've since picked up about 7, 8 years ago. I picked up the phone. So I'm in this almost 30 years now. I picked up the phone about 8 years ago and I called her and I said, you know what? I just wanted to tell you, thank you. Thank you for the gift that you gave me, because it was your mentorship, your tutelage is what made me, long and short, in allowing me to figure out who I was, what I was good at, and how I could best be utilized in any company or organization that I worked in the mortgage industry.
Were you an owner at Options?
No, it was at that point, I could have all but been. I mean, my world's always been assumptive. It is, don't wait for somebody to tell me I can do it if it makes sense and it's in the best interest of the company that I'm working for. So I step into the role and I act like I'm there. So I acted like I was an owner. And eventually everybody begins believing you're right there, right alongside her, because we did everything together. We would go out to lunch together. We would go to presentations together. We really developed a very good friendship and bond.
Well, and when you were talking about it, you said, we needed to make money. We had to, it was a we mentality from a guy that, on paper, it's not a we, but for you, you were just like, this is where I'm investing my time and energy, and this is something I believe in. And so I'm just going after it as an owner. I love that.
Yeah, it is. It's the way I've approached my entire career. I think somewhere along the line, whether it was Tony Robinson or the Nightingale Covenant tapes that I used to listen to when I was in my early years in the business, trying to learn how to do this, somewhere it sunk in. It was, if you know what you're doing is right, ask for help when you need it, but don't wait for someone to tell you it needs to be done.
Dude, that's the best. That attitude is something everybody wants on their team. That's what you hope that people are going to bring to the table. So you have that, which, as we get into this, that's probably going to be a theme that comes up over and over. But let's go to, your wife said, I'm moving and I'm taking the kids. Would you like to come?
Yeah. No matter how you shake it that day, that's my take. So to be fair, whatever the conversation was from her perspective, it may have been an ask in there. But honestly, on my side, it felt like it was, we're going, you can come if you want to.
Why Spokane?
Her parents lived over here and she wanted to get closer to them. And in the end, it was a blessing.
Yeah.
I am extraordinarily happy over here. It ended up that her father ended up being diagnosed 2 years later after we moved over here with cancer. And so my kids got to know their grandfather and really got to know the grandparents. So it was 100% a blessing. Didn't quite feel like it at the time, but it absolutely was a blessing for all the right reasons.
All right, so you move over to Spokane. this is getting to where we met. So you go over there, you start working. Were you a loan officer right away, or you went over there as an AE?
I went over there as an AE. As luck would have it, I reached out to Christine, who I was talking as an account executive, and said, hey, I'm thinking about moving over to Spokane. You don't happen to know if there are any openings over there? And as luck would have it, got involved with a great company. It was phenomenal, and there was an opening. I went through all of my tests and did the interviews, 3 or 4 interviews, and they said, yeah, let's do it. And I got lucky. My first day, I met Bob DeBrish of the company. I was long haired. I still had my mullet at that point. And we ended up going to my first train ride from Seattle to Vancouver, BC, and got to ride the train. Went up to the convention up in Vancouver, BC, and it was amazing career, and it's in that time period. And yeah, so that was how it all got started.
All right, let's fast forward, because we had a blast in that job. You're right, the people were awesome, the money was there. I mean, we worked, and we worked pretty hard, but really, you didn't have to work that hard to make a bunch of money. We just did because, that's who we were. So you worked super hard. Then the market changes. Were you there when they shut the doors?
So probably one of my less intelligent decisions of the times in the past. We're over in Spokane now for 5, 6 years, 7 years. We're going almost 6, 7 years. And I decide with one of my vendors that were over here, one of my companies, the COO of that company was like, I think I'd really like to go out and do it on my own, but I need some partners. Would you be interested? And I go, well, let's talk about that. Let's see what that looks like. So we go through the process of figuring it out, and we end up saying, yep, let's do this. We start building out the business plan, all the mornings and nights at Starbucks, building the business plan out, figuring out, doing our SWOT analysis, making sure we had everything set up, what was going to be different with us. Loved the company name. We were called Common Sense Lending. And we did have some things that were unique, but pretty much like most companies when it's all said and done. And we literally get everything set up, and I leave option 1. And the day we take our first application is the day that New Century filed for bankruptcy. So we literally begin the process of riding the wave down after starting a company, having warehouse lines. There were a lot of things that I could have done better at that time. He ended up being CEO. I ended up being COO, and we had a couple other partners that were tied to it. Great group of guys. It was a great opportunity. Some of the people that worked for us were just phenomenal, that they had faith in us and came with us and made the move through all of it. I think we made it all of about 11, 12 months. And because of the nature of the market, you couldn't hire anybody because everybody was afraid to leave where they were at. So we weren't able to bring any LOs over. It was hard to find. My partner and I were the only 2 originators. So we were the only ones trying to keep the company afloat. We had too much overhead. The whole sad story that goes with launching a company. It's a classic case of one of those times that it's sometimes better to be lucky than it is to be good. Mm-hmm. And we were just unlucky at the time that we started it. There were things we could have done better.
Let's pull some business lessons out of this, because I remember this because I was on your board for a hot minute there. And I remember when I first went up to meet with you guys and we sat down and you were like, this is the business plan. It was the most thorough, well-written business plan with full structure. But I remember looking at the org chart and going, everybody's a C-level person. Like, where are the loan officers? And you're like, well, that's us. And so you had built something with this dream of having a huge company that I think if you'd built it 5 years earlier, that huge company exists, right? I think that huge company might exist today. So I agree with you, timing was rough, but you did all the work to build something. How did you go from you knew that was the vision and that was the dream? How disappointing was it for you to see the market change your ability to get what you wanted?
I think that really didn't hit until I had to start letting people go. I was fine when, I mean, I just continued to believe that we were going to find a way through it. I figured that we were bringing in close to enough, but not quite enough. But it was going to change. We were going to find another couple of loan officers that it was going to move. But when I started having to laying off the staff that we did have, that was when the market changed, and at that point I became extraordinarily disheartened. I pretty much started to plunge down into the dark depths that come from losing your company. I had family issues that came up at that point and started losing my family, and having to corral everything, trying to hold it together. And it was, I think there are two places in my life that really mark how I am who I am today. One was back when I was playing soccer and I was going through 4 days for a month and a half in the Iowa heat. And we were 2 days from the end. And it was the first time in my life I'd ever broken down bawling, because we're setting up cones to go through the last couple of scrimmages to determine if you were going to make the team or not. And I didn't know that I had anything left, because I was driving a half an hour every morning, an hour more than everybody else in the mornings to get to the campus, because I was living with my grandmother. And it was just, I would get home at midnight and then I was back up leaving to go play soccer at 4 o'clock in the morning. That one taxed me. And then this one, as you start looking at how you're failing your friends, how you're failing the people that have trusted in you, how you're failing yourself, how you're failing your family, you look at all of that and you go, what the hell am I supposed to do? How am I going to find a way through this? And luckily, I had that incident back in college that basically taught me, you just put one foot in front of the other. You look down at your feet if you have to, because you can't look at the horizon like you're used to, and you just keep moving. And that's really, that was the toughest part of the whole process, was having to go, okay, I've done this before, kind of different, not as serious, not as many people relying, but you just put your feet, you just look down and you just keep plodding ahead. Did that answer your question? I don't know if I...
Yeah, I'm feeling it as you're explaining it. Like I love how you said, just keep moving. I always think of Dory from Finding Nemo. Just keep moving. But yeah, it's hard to be in a situation that most people will never find themselves in, right? Like having launched something, getting everybody excited. I remember your excitement of launching that company was huge. You had these big, huge dreams, and a lot of the difference, a lot of the struggle was out of your control. It was thrust upon you. But then the way you talk about it is how many people you failed. And I think one thing for listeners that they really need to hear is this conversation around like, what pieces do you take ownership of versus allowing yourself some grace and going, well, I mean, the market sucked. Like you just told me that New Century shut down a day after. That's common sense was going to do a lot of these loans, and that was one of your venues you were going to use. So the entire system changed, and your memory of it is feeling like, and I 100% understand it, your memory of it is feeling like, I'm not a guy who lets people down. I'm not a guy who fails. I did all the planning, and yet here I am failing everybody. And you're just in it, staring at your feet, hoping you can make one more step. And then the horizon, I love the way you described the horizon, because we do always look at the horizon. And I don't want to look at my feet. I want to look at the future. But you had to go, wake up, baby step to the elevator, baby step to my desk. Like, it's still in there for you, right? It's still you can still feel that.
And I think the part that in the end that held me through it was I had to take care of my kids. When it was all said and done, I lost my marriage. And in that marriage, I ended up being responsible for the kids. They came with me. And so when you've got kids, you've got to be their support system. Going through the chaos that was coming and we were rolling through, it was impacting them. So I think I turned the focus away from what I was losing and how I was failing and really first focused on making sure that I was delivering some kind of semblance for my kids, so that there was an order to their life, that there was a consistency and a pattern. And from that, I was able to slowly start building the bricks to back into the career and to everything else. I mean, went out, got a second job, was working when they were in school, finding ways to put money on the table so that we could make rent and everything else. And it really was about making sure that I was focused on. I find that in getting through everything, when I focused on other people and making sure that I was taking care of them, so particularly my kids, when it was all said and done, I understand that the market changed, and I own that I should give myself more grace for what happened at the time, because it wasn't all my fault. I still own that there were things that I could have done better, things that I could have changed that might have made it last longer, did things differently. But the success that I pull out of it is the fact that I was able to focus on my kids. And in focusing on my kids, I was able to regrow everything, because I was focused on providing them that environment. My sons and daughter are both wildly successful, and they may have some trauma from everything that came out of it, but they are good contributing humans to our community, and that's ultimately what you hope for as a parent, and that's my success that I come out of it, besides everything else.
So you redefine success.
Yes.
Like, your definition of success building the business was, I'm going to build this amazing business. We're going to employ all these people. We're going to be a great contributing member to this industry. And you shifted your definitions and went, well, if that's not going to be successful, it doesn't mean I'm not successful. It just means I need to find something else I can be successful at.
Yes. I changed the focus on at that point, the market and everything else that was happening focused, because I wanted to feel fulfilled. I wanted to know that I was doing the right thing. I know that I was still a valuable person. So the only way you overcome the downs that come with the chaos of what was happening there was by shifting that focus of success to something that's obtainable, and that you put it far enough out that you're still striving for it, and have a far enough picture. Because again, when focusing on success, it's not about looking at your feet. Success is always driven by what's out in front of you. And I am a very goal-oriented individual, as my wife will tell you now, that if she wanted something done when we were dating, she would make it a challenge. So she would go, hey, I really need all those. She had bought a house herself when we were dating. She goes, I want a house. I need these rocks in the backyard picked up, but I'm going to have my son come out and help you. Okay, that's a great idea. Thanks, I appreciate it. But the minute you put a 20-something out in front of a 40-something, there's no way I'm going to let that 20-something underwork me. So I've got to find a way to dig and go after, because it's a goal. It's an automatic goal that I set. And the same thing applies here is I shifted my focus to what I felt I could obtain and what was most important to me, and that was delivering for my kids. Wow. Yes, the other happened, but now I've got a new goal. And we focused on moving forward on that.
Do you remember the moment, or was there a moment that you went, okay, I've created some success here, or you were able to, kind of lean into, I'm not the guy that lost the company. I'm the guy that is an amazing dad. Do you remember if you had a shift, or at what point were you able to let go of that pain from the company experience?
Actually, I can say I don't know that I was in the moment going, hey, I got this. I figured it out. But there was a time period in all of this that I was homeless with my kids for 45 days, I think it was, maybe 60 days. And it was only upon the reliance of friends that I was able to keep them housed, keep them going to school. We weren't living out of a car. We were able to stay with friends through the process. And we moved from there into some temporary housing, a little 300 square foot loft apartment where it was me, the kids, and 2 dogs. And that was kind of like, that was the daily struggle, getting in front, one foot in front of the other, continuing. The day we moved out of that 300 square foot loft and we moved into an apartment was the day that the shift occurred. Because now I actually had a real house. I had stable income again. My kids were walking distance to school so that they could continue to be, and they were involved with all of their friends. And that was the day that I was like, I got this. We're going to take this one step, and we're going to go back and build everything that was.
Wow. Dude, and I don't know that I knew that you were homeless for a period of time.
No, that was not something. This is the first I've told. I mean, it's not something that I bring out into public.
Yeah. What? You and I didn't talk for a while.
No, that was the window.
Yeah.
We weren't able to connect because everybody was going through everything at that point. It was impacting you and your business, and you were having to focus on putting it all together, and you were having your own issues inside your company, and I was having this, so we just weren't able to.
Did you have people you connected with who, I mean, obviously you had friends to stay with. Were there people that you were totally honest with and like pouring stuff on?
There was a gentleman, much to my chagrin and sadness. He was recently diagnosed with cancer, but he was like a second father. And I think he helped stabilize through all this. I remember sitting at a couple of park benches talking through the process, and he's an ex-Air Force. He's got lots of experience. He was actually one of my realtor partners as a loan officer, that when his partner, who was a former customer of mine as an AE, had gotten out of the business because of the meltdown he had referred that LO had referred him to me. And in doing so, we developed a 20-year relationship. I mean, he was a lot of fun, a wordsmith beyond all compare, and still is. And he was a stable point in my life through all of that, and really helped me find my way. And when I needed guidance or I needed someone to bounce something off, he was always there, and he always kept me humble. Didn't let me get angry. Remember, it reminded me that there's always two sides to every story, and that I needed to keep my mind open, that it was not everything that was going on wasn't my fault. Mm-hmm. Didn't own it. Don't own it, and don't blame it on other people. Only own what was your responsibility, and make sure that you're looking at it.
Wow. Dude, wisdom is amazing, isn't it?
Oh, it is. I think and again, same thing. I've gone back and told him now, unfortunately, due to the causes in his life, but I've really tried to make a point of sharing with him, everybody that along this path that I've come, to remember to express my gratitude to them, because I wouldn't be here and I wouldn't be who I was without them.
Wow. I love that. I went to, I had this English teacher or communications teacher back in University of Colorado, Denver, where I went, and best teacher of all time. And it was so cool because he would always talk about his wife. His wife was dealing with cancer at the time, and he shaved his head in solidarity. And so he was a communications teacher, but like we got to live we got to see into his world, and he taught me to be vulnerable, to like not be afraid of letting my story help other people's stories. And I went back to thank him when I was in Colorado last time, and he had just passed away, and I didn't get the chance. So it crushed me to know that, like, I just wanted that, to be able to say it. So the fact that you are doing that, I think that's a huge lesson for people to, make sure that before it's too late, that we go out and thank those people that have been part of our journey and made, lasting impact.
I don't remember who it was that told me, and this is a byproduct of when everything. So we go through and the business is failing, and I've had to harm relationships just simply because I ended up having to pull the wagons in so tight that I couldn't protect those relationships the way I needed to and respect them for what they were and how they were a part of it. Somebody at the very beginning of that told me to make sure I grabbed a journal and write down all the people that helped me along the way. Because at some point I was going to want to be able to be thankful to them for the help to recognize what had been done to help me. And that I can't say that I was a very good journalist. I've never been a very good journalist, but what it did do is it made me trigger every time in my memory that if someone was going out of their way or doing something special for me, that it really triggered that I needed to show gratitude, and I needed, okay, I don't have the emotional wherewithal now to do it, but I know I have to in the future come back and take care of them.
Mm-hmm. So where are you at now? You built back out, you moved into the apartment, things started getting better for you. I know you worked at a bank for a long time at a very stable environment. We roll into 23. You move into an AE role, which I'll never forget the conversation you and I have. I always remember where I am in conversations. And I was in Vegas walking through a casino when you and I talked, and you said, I can either stay in this very comfortable place, or I can go, chase this dream of doing what I love to do. And in my mind, there's no question, but I always want to be careful how, I'm not the one who has to pay the bills, right, for you. So I can give you advice, but I want to be careful to give you advice based on, smart, decisions. But I do know that you reached out to a few people, and I loved that you were doing it. Like, get enough opinions from different people that you can then weigh, people who know you. You chose to go with a lender, and tell me about, like, what was your final makeup of that decision?
So getting back into the business as an account executive at the time, rates had just, again, kind of one of those kind of better to be lucky sometimes. And my major moves in life seem to come at the wrong times. So I've been thinking about it, talking with my wife for months, that I can continue to do this, but it's not me. It's not what I'm passionate about in that environment. I love the mortgage industry. That was very much always been who I am and what I love to do, and what motivates me in the morning. I just couldn't do it in the environment that I was in anymore, because it was changing in a way that I just wasn't on the same page with, and it didn't feel right anymore. So I'm sitting making a decision of whether I go, and got lucky enough to pick and get an interview with a gentleman who called me out of the blue going, hey, I'm just looking for somebody. Do you know anybody? And it was a nice tactic that was different of, hey, want to come work? And it was like, I'm looking for somebody else. Can you refer me? And I went through the interview, and I really kind of got excited. In fact, I started using some of the tactics that I've learned. I became aggressive about it. I wanted to do this. And so I kept following up and making sure that I was the only choice. And when the decision finally came down, it was because it was a well-known brand name. It reminded me of the brand, of some of the things that were option one, and the reference base that I have.
Mm-hmm.
And in the end, it was the faith and belief in myself that I've done this before. Regardless of what the outcome was from the market, I could do it again. And I knew I could. Luckily, with affirmation from you and many of the other people, they all agreed that I was exceptional at it, but was the market really ready for it? And I did the research. I found the Fitch reportings. I did everything what the anticipated non-QM growth is expected to be. What the percentage of a loan officer's, an individual loan officer's anticipated business should be, or is expected to be, over the next 5 years in their production. Well, the numbers were staggering. It was back to large numbers over time. When you took individuals, you had to group them all together. So it became a matter of, can you touch enough people to make it work? And well, reaching out and calling people and talking to people is not a problem. So I made the decision at that point that it was a process that I understood, that I knew how to put these type of loans. As long as I understood the things, I had gotten enough information from everybody. And at that point, the decision was like, you know what, I can do this. And I jumped. And it was a great decision, and was really excited, and everything fell together. And then the market did what it did last time. In the secondary market, the private money that everybody came, it dried up. I mean, everybody was frozen in fear, thinking we were doing 2008 over. And because they couldn't figure out what the numbers were, they hadn't gotten through the economics, that it was a different supply and demand situation, all the things that go into what created the last year and a half, similar but different. And ended up not being with that company anymore and found a new company, and continue to build on the successes that I had already started to get out of the first one. And again, it is about building relationships and figuring out how you bring value to people and being honest and earnest in that value you bring. And as long as you're doing that, whether I'm a loan officer, it's educating them to into those relationships. You can go product tout and do everything else, but if you're not bringing something that brings value, you're not going to get the brain space. You're not going to get the time from that realtor, because they're getting inundated from every other loan officer. So you have to be focused on that. And same thing applies as the account executive. I would say probably 80% of the people that I call don't answer the phone. As soon as they recognize it's me or a company phone call that's coming, and they recognize that it's not someone that's bringing them business, they don't answer the phone or they don't return the phone call. And that's okay, because sales is all about numbers. And as long as you keep that number perspective in place, you continue to build on it. And that's really, again, that's controllable. That sits on me. And as long as it sits on me, I'll be successful.
And do you have, all right, having been where you've been, right? Having hit rock bottom for you, relationship struggles, business struggles, do you look at every day differently now? Like, I'm way better off than I was, so life is good?
It is amazing. So this downturn and this decision to move, last time I made the move, I was not quite paycheck to paycheck, but I was skinny, because everything in the world back then, for everybody that was in the industry, most of us were leveraged. Mm-hmm. And not mildly. I mean, I remember you and I sitting and talking about, as everything was falling apart back then, was that it's time to go to the car lot, it's time to go to the thing, because you can get some great deals on used cars and jet skis and boats. And same thing, unfortunately, I had that same conversation with somebody else, that it's getting tight out there, and that a lot of these things are going to have to start going back, because we're now at that really tight part of the curve, where it's been tough for the last year, but now everybody's being squeezed. Managers are being asked to take less money. Everybody's having to downsize, because we're in that last final window before everything takes off again, where it always gets super, super tight. Mm-hmm. So this time I was better prepared. We didn't have just a couple of months. We had several years set aside so that we were in a better position to be able to maintain our lifestyle, trim it down, but maintain our lifestyle, be able to continue to make the bills, and gave me the comfort to know. Now, you always want to be squeezed a little bit, because without the pucker, there isn't the pursuit. And so you've really got to have a little bit of that pucker to make you push a little bit harder, to make that one extra phone call. And that's kind of where we're at now, as everybody's got to make that before you leave. Where's my one extra phone call? Where's my one extra effort for the day? What am I doing that's going to make the difference for tomorrow?
Dude, thank you for this. I'm gonna close it down, but you're a success story, having been through difficult times and then using the lessons from those difficult times to plug in today, to not over leverage. Please journal more. I know you said you like to journal, but I'm here to tell you, journaling is freaking amazing, and it's good. And so find a way to make sure that you're doing that, because I find that in good times I don't journal, and in bad times I do. But I also, if you were to read my journal, you're like, wow, this guy had a really rough life. No, I just journal when I'm sad. So journaling when things are good right now. I kind of hope that my journals become something my kids can go read into later and see the path that I took, and be able to hand that wisdom down. Because I think you're proof that wisdom comes from experience after experience after experience, but learning from those experiences and not making those same mistakes. So you're the definition of what I hoped for on this podcast, that we would have people that have learned from last time, plug those lessons in, and move forward. And I think people will get a lot out of that. So, dude, thank you for joining me today and for sharing your story.
Awesome. Thank you, Ken. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you again for your partnership, your friendship over the time. Again, as I said before, and I might as well do it publicly, I wouldn't be here today and be the person I am without your friendship and partnership over the years. So thank you. I truly.
I got you, buddy. Thanks, man.
Take care.